Rasheeda Frost's world came crashing down when she was blindsided by news that her husband, Kirk, had been involved in a massive financial scandal. What began as a typical day at her boutique turned into a nightmare when she was handed her phone, revealing explosive headlines about Kirk's alleged embezzlement and fraudulent business dealings. The reports detail how Kirk had been linked to a multi-million-dollar Ponzi scheme, and federal authorities were closing in on him. At first, Rasheeda thought it was just another rumor. Kirk had always been at the center of drama, but this was different. The accusations were too serious to ignore, and the evidence seemed undeniable. It wasn't until Rasheeda's assistant handed her the phone and she read the shocking details that the full weight of the situation hit her. Kirk's name was now tied to a major investigation. Bank accounts had been frozen, business assets were being scrutinized, and Kirk was potentially facing jail time. The betrayal was overwhelming for Rasheeda. How could her husband, the man she trusted, put everything they had worked for at risk like this? She quickly tried to get in touch with Kirk, but his initial response was far too casual, almost dismissive of the gravity of the situation. Rasheeda's fury erupted. She demanded answers. It wasn't long before Kirk admitted the truth in a quiet, almost reluctant voice. He had been involved in a shady investment deal that turned out to be a Ponzi scheme. He claimed he didn't know it would end up this way, but that was little comfort to Rasheeda, whose business and reputation were now at stake. As Kirk tried to explain away his involvement, Rasheeda's anger grew. She had trusted him, had stood by him through thick and thin, and now he had dragged her and her business into this mess. But the real punch came when she realized how deep the scandal ran. The feds were not just investigating Kirk, they were coming for her too. The thought of losing everything she had built, not just her marriage but her career, was too much to bear. Kirk's attempt to assure her that he could fix it only made things worse. He suggested he would take the fall for the whole mess, claiming that Rasheeda didn't know anything about the fraud. But Rasheeda was smart enough to know that the feds didn't work like that. They wouldn't just take his word for it. Her name was already associated with the transactions. She could lose everything: her business, her career, and possibly her freedom. The tension reached a breaking point when Rasheeda received a phone call from the FBI. The agent informed her that they needed her to come in for questioning regarding the fraudulent financial transactions. Rasheeda's heart sank. Not only had her husband betrayed her, but now she was facing the very real possibility of being implicated in a federal investigation. The emotional toll of it all was crushing. Rasheeda was left to process the shock of her husband's actions, the devastating impact it had on her life, and the fact that the very foundation of her success, her business, was now at risk. Kirk had promised her that there would be no more secrets, yet here she was, caught in a scandal she never saw coming. With the FBI involved, Rasheeda knew that she needed to take swift action. But no matter how much Kirk swore he'd make things right, Rasheeda couldn't ignore the cold, hard reality. She was now in the crosshairs. And as the authorities began to close in, she couldn't help but wonder if this was the end of her marriage and her career. The trust between her and Kirk had been shattered, and now the consequences of his actions would have far-reaching effects. As Rasheeda's world starts to unravel, the reality of the situation settles in like a ton of bricks. The phone call from the FBI, the unrelenting media storm, and the betrayal from Kirk hit her like a freight train. With each passing moment, she realizes that the life she had built, the business she had nurtured, and the reputation she had fought so hard for were all now at risk because of one man's reckless decisions. Kirk, once the man she thought she knew, is now the source of all her pain. Despite his desperate attempts to claim he didn't know the depth of the mess he was involved in, Rasheeda isn't buying it. She has heard the excuses before: promises of better decisions, reassurances that nothing would ever threaten their stability. But those promises mean nothing now. His failure to think through his actions, to consider the consequences before diving into shady investments, has not only jeopardized his future, but hers as well. Rasheeda may have built Press from the ground up, but now it feels like her entire empire could come crashing down. She can't ignore the call from her lawyer, The news that the FBI is preparing to freeze her assets is the final blow. She feels the panic rise in her chest. The thought of losing everything, of seeing her business accounts locked, her staff left without jobs, is a nightmare she can't bear to face. And then there's Kirk, the man she once trusted, now sitting in the corner of their living room, utterly defeated. His eyes are bloodshot from the stress, his shoulders slumped in resignation. But Rasheeda doesn't have the luxury of feeling sorry for him anymore. "You need to sign over your shares of press now," she says coldly, her voice unwavering. She has no time for more lies, no time for his broken promises. She's already lost too much. Kirk blinks in confusion. "Wait, what?" Rasheeda's gaze hardens. "You heard me. You are about to drag me down with you, and I will not let that happen." He stands, his anxiety palpable, rubbing his hands together. "Baby, listen, we can figure something out." But Rasheeda cuts him off. "No, we can't. You've already destroyed everything, and I'm done cleaning up your mess. If you care about me at all, you'll do what I ask." Kirk's voice cracks as he tries to explain. "Rasheeda, you know I didn't mean for any of this." "Do I?" She interrupts, her words sharp like daggers. "Because if you really cared about me, you wouldn't have let things get this far." The silence in the room is suffocating. Her anger is justified, and yet, somewhere deep inside, she feels an unfamiliar sense of guilt. Guilt for the years spent with Kirk, for the family they built, for the love she once believed was unshakable. But that love is now tainted by his actions, his dishonesty, his disregard for the consequences of his decisions. But Rasheeda can't afford to linger in that space. Not now. Not when everything she's worked for is slipping through her fingers. The silence between them is broken when Kirk finally agrees, though it's clear he's doing so out of desperation, not conviction. "I'll do it," he murmurs, defeated. Rasheeda doesn't feel relief. Not yet. She can't. Not while the FBI investigation is still looming. Not while the media circus has just begun. She knows that signing over the shares is just the first step. The fight to save what's left of her business and her name is just beginning. As the media frenzy escalates, Rasheeda remains silent. She's no longer trying to protect Kirk or make excuses for him. She's not defending his actions. She's fighting for her own survival. The statement she releases, asserting her innocence and cooperation with the authorities, is a calculated move. It's the only thing she can do to try and control the narrative before the blogs and tabloids tear her apart. But even as she hits post on her social media, she knows that the damage has already been done. The comments are flooding in. Some are supportive, some cruel, and others suspicious. The accusations begin, whispers of her being complicit, of knowing what was going on behind closed doors. The internet is unforgiving, and the public is split. Some people believe in her innocence, while others think she's just as guilty as Kirk. It's overwhelming. The pressure, the betrayal, the uncertainty. But Yandy's support is a beacon of light in the chaos. "You fight this," Yandy tells her firmly, and Rasheeda knows she has no other choice. The weight of the situation is too heavy to ignore. She has to take control of the narrative, and she has to start thinking about the worst-case scenario. What happens if the authorities find her guilty? The reality hits hard when her lawyer calls with the news. Her assets are at risk. If the feds go through with freezing her accounts, it could be the end of press and everything she's built. Rasheeda feels the cold grip of fear, but there's no time for panic. She has to act, and she has to act fast. Rasheeda's mind races as she processes the news. If her accounts are frozen, she won't be able to pay her employees, her suppliers, or even her own bills. The business she fought for, the one that had once been her pride and joy, could collapse before her eyes. And Kirk, he's been silent for days, not offering any solutions, just watching the train wreck unfold. Rasheeda knows that he can't help her now. He's too deep in his own mess. She has to save herself. She grabs her purse, determination setting in as she heads for the door. Kirk's eyes follow her, a mixture of guilt and helplessness in his expression. But she can't afford to feel sorry for him anymore. not when her future is on the line. When Rasheeda storms into the living room, she demands, "Sign over your shares, Kirk. Do it now." The look on his face is one of disbelief, but he knows there's no negotiating. She's right. His actions have already cost them too much. He can't take the business down with him. After a tense silence, he finally agrees, his voice small, almost defeated. "I'll do it." Rasheeda doesn't waste another moment. She doesn't feel relief. She feels nothing but the weight of the battle ahead. This is only the beginning. The days that follow are filled with uncertainty. The media continues to churn out stories, painting both her and Kirk in the worst possible light. But Rasheeda stays silent. She's no longer making excuses for him, no longer defending him in public. She's fighting for her own survival now, and in the battle for her future, she's determined to win. But as she sits in her car outside Press one night, staring at the neon lights that once symbolized her success, she wonders how long that success will last. Will her business survive this scandal? Or will the media, the FBI, and the public's judgment tear it apart? And what about her marriage? Can she forgive Kirk for what he's done? Or is this the final straw? Rasheeda knows that the answers aren't clear yet, but one thing is certain, she's not going down without a fight. The stakes have never been higher. The world is watching, and this is just the beginning of a story that will change everything.